Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about Kelek, the leader of the League of Malevolence. All right, so Kelek is in the new Wild Beyond the Witchlight. He is the leader of the League of Malevolence. All right, so basically, Kelek is really interesting. He is an evil wizard, right? Very classic. He's one of the core four, right? So Dungeons and Dragons, core four classes are wizard, rogue, fighter, cleric, right? And so it's really interesting because he's not that powerful. I would say he's probably only like 6th level at best if you look at his stat block. And one thing that really is really amazing is if you do look at the stat blocks on the League of Malevolence, these characters are very accessible, not super powerful, only have 1 or 2 magical items. Kelek is, he is a great villain. One of the things I love about this is, Kelek is, so he's coming from the Saturday morning cartoon. He has an action figure. If you try to buy him carded today, you will pay about $200 minimum, right? And like a perfect version of him that's maybe sealed or, it could be $300, $400, $500 easy, right? So he is an action figure. He is from the Saturday morning cartoon. He absolutely was listed right in Quest for the Heartland, and here he is in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and he's a core figure because he created the League of Malevolence. And there's a lot there, right? So one of the things that Kelek is doing that has not been done for a while in Dungeons & Dragons is just this very clear, harsh declaration of like, when you take your sword to cut Kelek down, there's good reason for you to take him out, right? Like, this is not a misunderstood person. This is a straight up villain. So one, he's incredibly petty and bitter. Like, his main goal in life is to have the Staff of Power, which he specifically, and it's not even, it doesn't even seem that he wants the Staff of Power that much. He just desperately wants to stick it to Ringelrun, right? He's just like super petty. Ringelrun is like the good wizard who's exactly like him, looks like virtually identical to him. Like, I think the action figure, they were like, this is an evil wizard because we painted his robes black, and this is a good wizard because we painted his robes white, right? Like, they're like the same dude, right? They're both bald old dudes, like, it's crazy. And I think it was like the same mold for Ringelrun and Kelek. They just have like different head mods and that kind of stuff. So Kelek is just very bitter and very petty and really wants the Staff of Power. He wants to take it from Ringelrun. And you get, it literally says it on his book, and he's like, and he wants Ringelrun to know he has his stuff, right? Yeah, it's not even about the powers, just like a big stick it to the, to the good man, like he really has it out for Ringelrun, right? But one thing that's really interesting about Kelek is this League of Malevolence he's creating. If you're a bad guy, why don't you just do it yourself, right? And one of the things, it's just the League of Malevolence is so practical, right? So the reason Kelek doesn't Kelek doesn't like Warduke, he doesn't like Zarek or Zorgash or Skyla. He doesn't like any of them, right? But he's also like, ugh, that's strong art, dude. He's got a whole bunch of allies, right? And he gets more allies by the day. I need some evil allies. There is power in numbers. And I love just how wonderfully practical it is, right? The other thing that's really cool that I love, Kelek is just a great figure. He's just an evil wizard who started his own evil league, right? Like, what's not to love? He's just so simple, so straightforward. It just really is wonderful, right? And I love, here's a villain, and when you try to put your sword to his heart, there's good reason for it. This dude there's nothing redeemable in him, right? Like, and he's intent on like harming the world, right? Like, and it's incredibly refreshing to see this in Dungeons and Dragons because it hasn't been there for a long time, right? And all right, so you have all that. The other thing is, let's talk about his stat block. He uses this thing called Fiery Explosion, and he uses spell casting. And one of the things that really blew me away on these stat blocks for all of the League of Malevolence, but definitely Kelek, is just how simple he is, right? So they say, oh, there's a lot of complexity in running a wizard, right? Well, Kelek's got like 6 spells. He's got a staff that he uses, and it's very clear too. They're like, hey, wizards, if they run out of spell, they're going to attack with their staff, right? And I just love this idea. They're like, nah, you're not going to resort to a cantrip. You're going to literally hit somebody over the top of their head with your staff, right? So I love that, there is practical thought given to how a wizard will physically attack if they're cornered, right? They talk a lot about this fiery explosion, and they tell you how to use him. But at the end of the day, Kelek is one page, right? And less than half that page is dedicated to, I'd say about maybe 55 to 60% of the page is text, right? But he is incredibly simple, right? They're like, hey, here's his attacks. This is what, how you're going to use them. Use the fiery explosion tactically. And then they're also like, make sure that you know that he can attack physically with this staff. And here's spellcasting, right? And they're like, you could switch out any of his attacks with the use of spellcasting, and here's 6 spells that he has, right? And one of the things that really hit me is I'm like, wait a second, I'm not fully following this, right? So one of the things that was really kind of a big deal is I'm like, hey, why are these non-player characters so simple to run and so straightforward? But then when you try to do the same thing with a player character, why couldn't a player character run a 6-level wizard with exactly the same type of stat block as Kelek, right? Why couldn't we allow that amount of simplicity to be there for player characters, right? And I think the answer why is we have this tradition of arbitrary complexity for player characters and a ton of tactical options and an overwhelming amount of spells, most of which are never used, right? And we have these traditions of arbitrary complexity in Dungeons & Dragons that really desperately need to die. And I'm excited about Wild Beyond the Witchlight because it does point to the idea that the design team knows this, right? And is moving toward a more simple model. So I really think it's fascinating. Kelek is fantastic. I really love him as a Dungeons & Dragons villain. And I'm just so happy to see his return in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I'm just, there's so much here. Wild Beyond the Witchlight is, in my opinion, the most effective celebration of Dungeons & Dragons history in a core rulebook that has happened in a long, long, long time. And I think it's there because of Christopher Perkins. And I think Christopher Perkins raised his game and worked much harder on this book than some of the other books and abandoned. I think Christopher Perkins, this is just my opinion, is firing on all cylinders and is a better employee now than he has ever been because of the lack of Mike Mearls. This is just my opinion, but I think Mike Mearls was the engine of productivity on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I honestly believe he's 80% of the reason why Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition succeeded where 4th edition massively failed. And now that he's gone, I'll tell you right now, I don't think Ray Winiger is doing jack all of much of anything, right? And I think Chris Perkins in the old days was focused on a lot of elements of the game that were not beloved by most of the fans and was just doing laps of worrying about things that coastal elites worry about and that most players don't worry about. And I think now that Mike Mearls is gone and, we're in this latte apocalypse, I think he's like, I've got to put out books people actually want to read that celebrate the game that exists, not this future game that we are insisting will work but may not actually work, right? And so I think he's just I think he was always capable of this, but I think when Mike Mearls was there dealing with all the crufty, horrible aspects of the community and doing a lot of work, right? I think a lot of people were like, well, Mike can take care of all the real world problems and I can just pile up a bunch of nonsense in this product. And if it doesn't sell, Mike will push back against the people at the top, right? And I think since he's not there, I think everybody's on notice we need to make stuff that people are actually going to read and use. And I think Wild Beyond the Witchlight is 100% that. I really, really do. It's a really the best book I've seen in a long, long time. All that's my opinion. What do you think? Do you see what I see? That that these Dungeons and Dragons books could be a lot cleaner and a lot more focused on the existing game that already is there, rather than this future version that they were trying to build, like this post-alignment Dungeons and Dragons, that probably would have sucked hard, right? Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. What's your experience with Kelek? Have you ever faced him in the game? Do you remember him in the awesome Saturday morning cartoon? Have you ever seen the figure in real life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.